Welcome to today's group call with Gail Pelto and me, Mike Husson, and we're here today to talk to you about negotiating, win-win negotiating, and the psychology of influence, a very, very important topic. And before I get on, before we kick this call off, if you guys have any questions, whether it relates to Gail or not, I kind of emphasize that in my email to you all. Please, bring them up. Maybe you're dealing with a particular issue, challenge. Maybe you've had some experiences in the past that you want to try to overcome. Maybe we didn't cover it here today. Please make sure that you address it. We'll stay here as long as we can. Maybe up to 45 minutes if necessary. If it goes longer, that's okay. It depends on Gail. I don't know what her schedule might be like, but, this is an open line. We're going to go through some bullets. Gail's going to go from there, and then at the end, we'll open it up, and any feedback, thoughts, comments would be great, okay? So, again, I want to welcome everybody to today's call, and this is an important topic. Gail and I have been talking about this, and she's had some great success in the last couple of weeks or so, putting deals under contract. But I noticed one thing with Gail, that she's always thinking outside the box, but also keep making sure all her T's are crossed, all her I's are dotted on her transactions. And it just doesn't relate to just that, guys, as it relates to negotiating transactions. Fundamentally, they've got to be win-win, okay? And what that might mean to a lot of people, it could be a lot of different things. But my belief, and I believe Gail is on the same page here, is that there's more to it than just crossing the T's and dotting the I's and making – can you hear me?
Uh-oh. Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. You're here.
Hello?
Yeah,
I am not on the call. Somehow you all just disappeared.
You're there, Gail. If you can hear me? Can anybody else say they hear me? Elijah, you hear us?
Yes, sir.
I hear you.
Great.
Gail,
I
can
hear
you. Gail, I hear you.
Okay, great. My main speaker, she's fallen off the face of the earth. Let me tell her to redial in.
Hello.
Dial back in. Dial back in. Okay.
It's too far.
All right, guys. So we're still here. So I'm going to go back to this thought today, and what I want to make sure that we understand is a couple of things. I wouldn't say two things, but there's a couple of things, okay? And the couple of things are this, is one, we're in a changing market, and I hear it from my clients, as an ongoing thing now, at least in the last month or so. There's been some slowdown, and I get that. And part of it is obviously we're at a peak in our market, and we're shifting. In that prices have gone up. They've somewhat gone to critical mass. Okay, great. You're here. Great. All right, so so that's very important to understand that. What that means is whatever we go out and get transactions, we got to be the very best we can at keeping the ones that we do get. Even if it's a slowdown, the market's shifting and so on, we've got to be fully prepared for that. So I want to make sure that we get this thing buttoned down, and it's not going to happen in just this call only, albeit there's going to be some terrific ideas that I know Gail will share with us. But it's really important that you guys really hone on this particular skill. The other thing I didn't before I got digressed there is this is, as I said, not about just crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Negotiation.
Me, Mike, can you hear me okay? Because
I can hear you.
Hearing you okay. Okay, because you're going in and out. I'm going to hang up again and dial in one more time.
Okay, go ahead.
Right.
No problem. So what we want to make sure is to understand that it is about a relationship. More than ever before, what's going to have people hold on to you and you're going to create the opportunities versus somebody else is really how you interact in these conversations with people, making sure it's win-win, making sure that you're communicating not only with your clients, but all of the parties involved. That includes mortgage, it includes title, and equally, if not more important, the other agent if you're communicating with other agents on the other side of the table. So it's very, very important that we understand the tactical side, of course, but strategically we have to understand that this is about relationships. So that being said, I'm going to pass this on to Gail. Gail, just a quick background. Okay, great. Just a quick background, if you will, on what you're doing and what you do. And guys, if you can, on your backside, maybe you could just hit the mute button on your phone, and that way I can mute out the call, but I think Gail is on the general line here, so I don't want to mute her out in case I do. So if you guys want to mute out your calls, okay, that's fine. That's all right.
I came in on the host line again, so it's okay.
Okay, great.
A little background about where I am and how I got here and all this stuff. I have been doing real estate for about 8 years and actually started cold calling, geofarming for listings. And I have a background about 30 years plus in sales prior to that, so I've always been in that kind of customer service mindset of taking care of my people, because I realize that if I take care of them, all my goals will happen. And Mike and I have talked about negotiating over the plenty of months and years of working with him as my coach. And I actually teach a class on negotiating. We kind of looked at it just from everything. It's not just negotiating contracts. That's certainly a big part of it, but the actual negotiation starts on your first phone call, whether it's working with a buyer and setting up an appointment and then going through the buyer brokerage agreement, the exclusive agreement saying that they are going to work with you, your listing agreement, and then, of course, your contracts. And I think the big thing on all of those is that negotiation is a discussion, and it's aimed at reaching an agreement, and so that everybody is on that win-win page, whether you're working with a client or whether you're working with the agent on the other side of a transaction. Everybody's got to win. Both agents, buyer and seller, everybody's got to win. I don't know where you want me to go from here on this, or just start with the listing agreement, Mike?
Yeah, Gail, let's go with it however you feel, and just go with it. Yep, you're fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. The first thing is how you show up, really, and I'm talking about what you look like. And even though somebody telling a book by its cover is not necessarily right, it happens. So showing up and looking like a professional is the number one thing. And I'm coming to you saying that from a gal who was the first one who had purple hair and a brush cut in the early 80s. So I'm giving away my age now, and how much explaining I had to do to overcompensate for how I looked, because I didn't look like the professional that showed up. So I think that very first appointment, you need to look like you know what you're doing, whether you do or not. It's going to make a huge difference on how your conversation goes. So because I work with listings primarily, let's talk a little bit about the listing agreement and pre-qualifying before you show up so that it's worth your time. But there's certain things on the listing agreement that you have to negotiate. One's the length of the listing agreement. And I'm sure we've all had appointments where they say, well, I'll list it with you for 2 months, right? Well, no. The price that you're actually going to set, the commission that you're going to be paid, what happens after the termination date of the agreement, if a buyer comes back a week later who saw it, and are you out of the loop, or do you get to get paid, the compensation that you're going to pay out to other brokerages, cancellation fee, and any additional terms that might be in that agreement. So, of course, my listing agreements primarily go for 6 months, sometimes longer, depending on the property and what the average days on market is for past sales in there. Of course, the price, and that's a negotiating thing. And I think if you know your scripts and you know your market, having your seller agree to an appropriate list price is key. That's key. We all work for free until it closes. So your job is to get the property sold and to find out the motivation of your seller and give them all the information, so when you ask them what price do you think we should set on your home, that they come up with the right answer, which has a lot to do with what you know going into there. The fact that you're going to use a lockbox system. I know that in my market, sometimes when I get into the higher priced neighborhoods, they want the agent to be there, even though the client is walking in with another qualified agent. And sometimes I can negotiate that lockbox in there, and sometimes I hire a showing agent to go unlock the door for these people. But if you can get them to allow you to put the lockbox in there and assure them that you're not sending anybody in there who's going to pocket all their figurines from grandma and walk away with all that stuff, that's good, because it allows them to get as many qualified buyers in as possible. And the fact that you're going to withhold verbal offers, I don't allow verbal offers on the first part of a transaction. I want to know, for my client's sake, whether or not if it's as is, or if they want an extended closing date or whatever. So I'm not just going to say, hey, will you take $500,000? We want to know all the terms and conditions, and getting the other party to actually write it all down will tell us that they're a more serious buyer. So, that's a part of the thing that's also on the listing agreement. Compensation, that's always a big one. I'm sure all of you, as well as myself, they've said, will you lower your commission? So knowing how to answer that question and knowing how to educate them on how the commission works. So standard commission for me is 6%, and oftentimes your seller thinks that whole 6% ends up in your pocket. So sometimes you have to educate them how that gets split out, what you have to pay your broker, what you're going to pay the other agent, what the costs are involved, and then after you get your commission split, maybe it's actually 40% of that actually goes home with you to feed yourself and your family, and go on trips like to Paris and stuff like that. If retained deposits, that's another thing. Let's say you get something in under contract and the deal falls apart, and the deposit they put down, whether it was $2,000 or $10,000, is going to stay with your seller. We split that 50% with the seller because of the work that we were involved with it as well, and what you're going to pay out to other cooperating brokers, so what you're going to pay on the other side. And on my listing agreements, I put up to 3% because I don't pay out usually 50-50. And on a no brokerage relationship, I lower it even further since they don't have any liability concerns. And then whatever additional terms that you have on there. Are they selling it furnished? Do they need an extended closing date? Do they all those other things that you have to talk about is to make sure that you negotiate all of them in there. So by the time you get to the appointment, if you've done your due diligence on the front end and you've done your pre-qualifying, the negotiating of the actual listing agreement should be fairly easy. And on occasion, you'll show up and it's all signed and ready for you to go, and it's those wonderful 2-3 minute listing appointments, and you walk out the door with the listing. If you don't do that, then you have to do a heck of a lot more talking when you get there, which kind of wastes some valuable time. So for me, the listing agreement has, because I've done enough of them now, and because I role play with Elijah, who's on the call, we role play our listing presentations. It gets a little bit easier, especially when you've gotten some objections and you've learned how to handle them. And that's the big thing too. When you get an objection and all of a sudden you walk out there without the listing agreement, go find out how to handle it next time, because it's going to come up again, whatever it was. And you want to make sure that you walk out with that listing agreement. The second part of negotiating is on the buyer side. And because I didn't do a lot of buyers when I first started out, I was on a team and we had buyer's agents. I worked with Mike a lot on this, on actually setting up the appointment, kind of going over how you work, and to bring them in, have them come in with a pre-approval letter from their lender or proof of funds if they're a cash buyer, and setting up a convenient time on your calendar, just like you would do a listing appointment. You know, when could you come in? I've got time today at 3, or would 5 be better? Give them a choice of times, and then make sure that all the decision makers are there. So just getting all that set up in front, again, makes it all easier and doesn't waste your client's time as well as your own. And then the other big thing, which I just find, since I've gotten in this business, I just find it amazing that people who work with buyers don't get an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement signed. For those of you who don't know what that is, you really need to figure that out. And they'll take listings, right? And they know they'll get a listing agreement, but there's this fear about getting a exclusive buyer brokerage agreement signed. But everybody gets burned who doesn't do that. Somebody walks into a for sale by owner, or they walk into new construction, and the next thing you know, you get a text message that says, hey, thanks for your help. We found a house. We just signed a contract, and you're out of the loop. So when I do my exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, because it can be daunting to the person on the other side, especially if they first met you, I go over my service commitment, which I equate to what your marketing plan of action is for a listing. And it's those items that I say I'm going to do for them and why they're hiring me to make sure we get them the best property at the best price. And then after I go through all of that and initial all of that and give that to them, then I go over the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, and then that makes it a heck of a lot easier. I do my agreements for a year. I don't care if they say they're buying in 2 weeks. I do it for a year, starting the day of that appointment to a year from that date. Type of property, I just put residential in. Location, I put the state of Florida. So I don't just do it in my marketplace that I work. I do it for the whole state of Florida. And if they say their budget is $500,000, I do it from 0 to $5 million, because I'm figuring they might be lucky and win the lotto tomorrow, and their price point will go up.
Yeah.
And then what I do, I don't know, and those of you who have this form in your other states, I don't know if you have the sentence, but there's a part on there that says the buyer will pay the broker a non-refundable retainer fee of X, and that you can that it'll be credited to the buyer if the compensation is earned by the broker as specified in the rest of the agreement, meaning if they get a commission. I always write down $1,000, and then I cross it out, and I say I'm going to waive our retainer. It's kind of a giving them something back thing. And I think it just kind of eases the pain a little bit. I used to do this when I was in event planning. I would put that on my contracts, like, client will use club bud vases at no charge, right? I would or charge waived, no plate, no cake cutting fee, stuff like that, because then people feel like they're getting something, that they're not just giving something. And again, that's just me. You guys do it however way you want it. And then I put down my minimum commission. My minimum commission is 3%. And which means if the seller side is paying out 2.5, then that 0.5% is absorbed by the buyer, and it'll show up in their estimated net sheet once we get under contract. So there's no question about that. And earlier I said I put the state of Florida, because in my special clauses I'll put something like, should buyer decide to purchase a home in the state of Florida and outside my association, then I agree to interview agents in that area and refer the buyers to that agent. And then if I receive a referral fee for the buyer's transaction, then the compensation due, as noted in this agreement, would be waived. So if they come looking in here and then they go, ooh, it's 31 degrees this morning, I'm moving down to where Elijah lives, then I'm going to interview an agent and do a referral fee, and then whatever compensation was on here would be waived because they went out of my area. There are so many agents. There are 450 agents in my office, and I'll bet you less than 10% of them, maybe even less than 5%, actually get a buyer brokerage agreement signed. If you're worth your weight in gold, right, and you want to work with for free, then don't get it signed. But if you want to get compensated for all the work you're going to do on the front end, then I think it's crucial that you sit down and go through this. But you have to tell them what you're going to do for them so that they know you're worth this. If it's somebody that I don't feel a connection with at the actual consultation in the beginning, I'll go out and show them 2 to 3 houses, and at the third house, I'll say, so I really want to work with you. Do you want to work with me? And if they say yes, then I'll start this process. But if they don't sign it, I don't go out again. It's just they're telling me that they're not going to guarantee that I'm going to be compensated for the work that I'm going to do for them. And I would rather just go get on the phone and get another listing and get that agreement signed than drive around for, 27 hours in a car, which would never happen.
Gail, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question on that note there. I know you work with a lot of high-end buyers, the $1 million, $2 million, whatever, in that window, above $1 million. Are these buyers signing an agreement too, and is there any differentiating factor between the person spending, let's say, $300,000 versus $1, $2, or $3 million? Do you find that you're is it like awkward to present to the guys that are looking to buy the expensive homes that you're going to put them under contract because they're spending that much money? How dare you, kind of a thing? Or do you do it with everybody? Yeah.
I do it with everybody. And I'll tell a little story here. So a couple of weeks ago, I mentor some new agents in our office. And so one of my mentees who had never dealt in the realm of multi-million-dollar homes, but has more chutzpah than anybody I know, got on the phone and called an expired listing. So Horse Farm was listed at $2.5 million, and she got the appointment, and she was scared to death to go on the appointment. So she said, will you co-list it with me? And I said, sure. And so we put our listing package together. She delivered it out there. On the way out, I said, I am not going to take half of your listing. I will coach you through it. I'll do it for 25% instead of 50%, but we're going to go out and get this listing. So we go out there, 60-acre farm, beautiful, 7,000 square foot home. The guy answers the door. He's in T-shirts and swim trunks, a little bit older. We go through all of it. We get the listing. We get back in the car. We're driving back, and I go, so what difference did you see in this appointment? And she goes, none. I go, the only difference is where that decimal point is. They're all humans. They're all humans. So they, in the multi-million-dollar range too, you get a lot more business owners as opposed to people who work for other businesses, and they would never do their services for free for somebody else. I think that people who are in business probably respect the fact that you come in there as a professional with an agreement and with a service commitment and a process of how you're going to help them get the best deal.
They like that.
So I think you come in as a professional. I can remember the first house that I listed when I was not in real estate, and the girl just showed up with a listing agreement, right? Blah blah blah, and now I've had enough experience under my belt that I get people that say, oh my gosh, I've never had this before. I've bought 5 houses. I can't believe you brought this, and then the icing on the cake is the handwritten thank you note, and this sealed the deal. You just come off like you know what you're doing and that you're doing it full time. And there is no difference with how those people eat, drink, or go to the bathroom. And there's no difference in the process of selling their home. The process is the same. It's just the payoff is a little bit greater, which is nice. Don't get stuck in that. Don't say, I'm just going to go sell a couple $1 million homes. They take a while longer sometimes to sell because the number of people who can afford them is a smaller buyer pool. So use that as the icing on the cake. And then follow up with them and make sure you don't let them go by the wayside because they might buy another one down the road. But yeah, to answer your question in long form, no difference except the decimal point in my head.
Yeah, so negotiating through that, and guys, this is, don't take it this is just a system and a process, albeit it is, but you're negotiating your relationship, right, Gail, with these people by presenting, because Gail goes through the steps that I talk about with my clients that, you meet them, and she said it, I don't want to be overly redundant here, but she takes them, says, this is how I work. And when you say that, you're opening up the opportunity to negotiate terms that are going to be good for both you and them versus just about them. Nobody else has ever signed, I never signed an agreement with another agent. Well, this is how I work. If you want to work this way, that's great. And really you're negotiating and you're positioning yourself as the authority. And when people recognize that, when it's done simply but yet formidably, people will want to do business with you because that's what they're here to do. This is one of the biggest investments most people will make in their whole lives. And when you come in with that posture and that positioning, you're going to get it high. So I love that, Gil. Thanks for saying that. You can continue on with I just want to bring that up. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that comes with that first 6 rudiments of persuasion, the psychology of persuasion and influence, right, is authority, that we are more likely to comply with a request if it is coming from a perceived authority or expert in the field. So if you come in there as the expert or perceived expert, right, fake it till you make it, then people are more likely to sign the things that you bring to them. They're hiring you because it's a pro, right? If they thought they could do it themselves, they'd come out as a for sale by owner. So they think they're hiring the expert, so you need to show up as the expert. And if you show up as the expert and you've got all your ducks in a row, then getting them to sign the agreements is the easy part. But you got to show up, letting them know what you're doing. So the first the rudiment we were talking about, I cross out the $1,000 retainer fee. That's the number 1 rudiment of persuasion, which is reciprocity. People feel obliged to give if we've been given something. The second one is scarcity, right? Antiques, artworks, and trophy properties are all examples of scarcity, persuading people to act. The authority we just went over. Consistency. People tend to gravitate towards and feel more comfortable in situations that are consistent over time. This is why treating the other broker like an enemy will backfire. That's a big one. Again, if you've been in this business a long time, you have done business or you have been with an agent or you have been that agent where you think it's a fight to get it to closing. And it's not. Negotiations, the definition is it's a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. So it's that win-win thing. There shouldn't be a loser. So that's huge. And liking. Everyone likes people who are similar to themselves, and studies have shown that in group preference is positively correlated with persuasion. That's where that whole teaching thing of mirror and matching comes in. Know who you're talking to. Right? If you get somebody who's in the DISC profile, it's compliant. What's the DEAA? What's that? Accountable?
Mm-hmm.
Mike? So if you get into a situation when you talk to somebody on the phone and they're all about getting all the information, get the T's crossed and the I's dotted, then you need to show up with some stats. Right? Because they want to see the stats. And if you're doing price reductions, they need to see the stats. I just had a closing with somebody like that, right? And we had to do a price reduction. When we went on market, there was 4 months of inventory. 2 months later, there were 11 months of inventory. So just like that, it went from a seller's market to a buyer's market, and everything stopped. But I had to come with stats, which I could print off of my MLS. So know that person you're talking to. Driver personalities. And you know me, hi, right? Driver personalities just throw me for a loop. But they're bottom line people. All right, just tell me the bottom line. How much can you sell this thing for, right? So you need to know who you're talking to and get on the same page with them. And then consensus. If you have a reputation as a great agent to work with, more agents will want to work with you, and as a result, you'll gain leverage in negotiations. So those are all pretty powerful. Learn the power of no. This is, yes is a horrible word. It scares people. They wonder what they've committed themselves to. They become nervous. They become distracted. And when you're distracted, they're not listening to you. And this is from a quote from a guy named Chris Voss, who was a hostage negotiating. So this is getting a no that'll actually move you forward moves you forward. You want an agreement. Agreement is not necessarily through yes, because again, we're so used to being trapped by yes. So that's an interesting one. Price anchoring, to find somebody's lowest price, right? So, hey, Jim, I'm taking a look at the numbers, and don't kick me out of here, but our initial glance is somewhere around $250,000. And he responds, Matt, I told you I wanted $350. No way $250 works. I won't take a penny less than $300, right? So just like that, you find out that they will come down $50,000. Learn what the other party needs from the deal. This is important. So let's say you're working with a buyer. You want to call the seller's agent for a couple reasons. A, to let them know that you're writing up an offer on the property, so that if they get another offer, they'll wait for yours. You don't want to lose it. But also see if there's any terms or conditions that the seller needs. Like, do they need to close really fast? Do they need a contingency for them to find a new home? And then also take the time to tell the agent a story about the buyer, and that they're pre-approved, or they're a cash buyer, or giving them a little warm and fuzzy, because it just makes that conversation as you're negotiating the contract go a little bit easier. And if you find out some stuff about what the seller needs up front ahead of writing it all out, you might be able to save yourself some time when you're actually doing the contract. The other thing, too, is whether you're working with a buyer or a seller, it's vital that the other side of the table never thinks that on the buyer side this is their favorite home and it's the only home, right? Because now you are showing your cards, right? Or that if you're the listing agent, that the seller is desperate to sell their home, because then that lowball offer comes in. So just stay a little nonchalant on that part of it. Oh, and here's another one. This is a huge pet peeve unless somebody wants this. So we're all big into texting and emails now. But in a voice-to-voice conversation, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone, you get a more natural back and forth, and the understanding comes out, and those things can be essential. So at all costs, avoid doing everything on text or email. Get voice-to-voice all the time with your client, especially if you're presenting an offer. You've got a listing and you're presenting an offer. Don't just email the offer. Call them up. Get excited. Oh my gosh, great news, we got an offer. Right? Don't give them the price. Tell them all the good things. It's a cash offer. There's no financing contingency. They don't want you to pay for a home warranty. They put down that they want to close on or before December 1st. So if you want to close next week, they can do it. If you need to wait until January 1st, they're flexible. Tell them all the good stuff, and then get to that lowball price at the end, right? Tell them all the good things, right? And get excited on the phone. It's so important. So important.
So you can't make the distinction with the written word versus the sound of a voice. It's a huge difference, guys. Yeah. So, I mean, today more than ever before, they want to do this, and you're going back and forth on text, but there's no emotion in that. Just a bunch of typewritten words that I don't want. Right? I don't want to see this. I want to see that, right? So you have to you can explain some things with a text, such as, "Hey Gail, give me a call. I need to talk to you about this offer." Well, what is it? When we speak, we'll talk about it. Thanks. Here's my number. Here's the best time to call me, etc. But engage that conversation, if I'm hearing you, Gail, via the phone or face to face, whatever you got to do. But you can't negotiate the final negotiation is the signed contract, right? And you can't negotiate it in text or in email. You can articulate some things, but, maybe to clean up maybe something or an item here again. But really, guys, Gail has hit it on the head there. You got to, that enthusiasm, that energy, that explanation of something to the agents that you're dealing with that she mentioned, and to the sellers and the buyers, do it on the phone. They can't, I only do things by text. That's a bunch of horse malarkey. That's this cop out. They don't want to deal with anything. And so it is your obligation and your authority that says, guys, this is how I'm going to work on negotiating this transaction. We must communicate via phone. If they're insistent on only text, don't negotiate. What else is there, Gail? We're not going to negotiate via text. We're not going to negotiate repairs, challenges with inspection reports. This is what they said, and this is the numbers. You got to get them on the phone, guys, one way, shape, or form.
And I made this error the other day. I sent my client. I said, here's the repair request, right? I told him we gotten the inspection and the repair request back, and I was going to send it to him, right? And I didn't explain more on the phone. So when I sent him the repair request and the inspection, he bypassed the request, which was minimal, and then opened the inspection report, and there was that red typed writing on every page. He was like, oh, my God, they're nickel and dime. And he went, oh, never mind. I opened the other one. But, we could have avoided all that if I would have just told him a little bit more. Listen, there's just some minor electrical things on the inside of the house. Probably the most expensive thing will be some of the tiles on the roof are cracked and need to be either sealed or replaced. And I didn't finish that conversation, so, he blew a gasket, and so I could have saved him from that. So if you send a contract over and you type in giant letters, great news, we have a contract, blah, 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 they're going to skip the rest of the email and just open the offer. And then when they open the offer, they're going to go directly to the price. They're not going to look at any of the good things that came with it.
Yeah. Do you ever have your buyers or thought about it? I suggest this every now and again if you're in competing offers to negotiate for your buyers in their best behalf, that they write a cover letter maybe as to why they want the house. Not sounding overly needy, but at the same time, this is we love your home and this is a great place. Have you ever thought about doing that, or do you do that, Gail? Just out of curiosity.
Have done it with a few of the buyers that I've done that. The other thing, too, if there's competing offers, you can do an escalation clause, where you put in it and say, we'll increase our offer by $10,000 over your highest offer, not to exceed X. Right? So, if it's a $200,000 property and you're getting multiple offers, and you go back in and go $225,000, and if you get an offer higher than this, we'll beat it by $10,000 to a maximum of $250 or whatever it is. So,
right.
And a lot of agents don't know to do that. That's an ability. So, and basically you'd say, we hereby instate an escalation clause, right? Buyer Bob Smith is willing to pay $10,000 higher than your highest written offer, but not to exceed $500,000. A copy of the highest written offer to be sent along with acceptance. So, you've got to see that other offer, right?
Right.
This is interesting, too. I got this from Barbara Corcoran. She says, take your fiduciary duty seriously. You need to make every possible effort to get your client a better price. Negotiation is like dating. There's got to be some romance. If the guy gets the girl home on the first date, it's too easy and the relationship doesn't last. Nothing poisons a deal faster, she added, that when the asking price is immediately accepted or when a buyer's first bid is accepted, either the seller feels he's underpriced his home or the buyer feels he's offered too much money for it. Rather than work on the relationship a bit, the buyer and seller tend to drift apart. So that's interesting when you're doing contracts. It's like, okay, so they offered me full price. I must not have priced it high enough.
Yep.
Or they accepted our offer. Shoot, I gave them too much. So that's an interesting thing to deal with.
Well, like the investors, they do that. I mean, oftentimes if they're making an offer on a property for themselves or a client, and you're working with an investor, and they come in and they make the offer and it's immediately accepted, they shoot themselves. Oh my gosh, I offered too much. I could have probably gotten this for a lot less money, right?
Right.
And of course, a smart investor, when that does happen, will go back and renegotiate. I don't want to get into the details of that, but they'll renegotiate a lower offer later once they get it under contract and they tied it up, things like that. But that's a separate discussion on that piece there. But yeah, I love what Barbara says there. Very important.
It's very
guys,
important.
This is and I think to that point, this is you're building a relationship here with people, as I said early on in the call, and that's, again, it's not just about the number. It's about how we present. And I wrote down, Gail said, personality styles, knowing them are radically important, and how you present will get the offer accepted or denied. And oftentimes it's because you didn't rapport with them, and you didn't rapport with them because you were trying to sell them on yourself, which is fine, but you were trying to sell it the way you sell things. Like me, I walk into a deal. I'm a pit bull in a china shop, and I'm dealing with an amiable sitting on the corner there, and they're going to say, "Oh, Mike, you're so enthusiastic. I love your energy, and you're such a bottom line kind of guy." But we say no, because I didn't rapport with that individual. So that's a very, very important element there, what you said, Gail. And this relationship thing is very, very important, that you get engaged with people at a very high level. And you'll negotiate better when you do that, and they'll respect you more as a result. I believe that more than anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you have to look too. And then when you get to the contract part, where you're writing a contract, let's say for a buyer, you have to really look at how do we make this attractive to the seller, right? Not how can we get as much as we can get. It's like, how is this going to be a win-win? So maybe you go in as is, right? You can do with a right to inspect, right to cancel, but maybe go in as is. Maybe you're coming down a little bit lower than market value. Go in and don't ask for a whole bunch of stuff. Or maybe you want to give them more, and you want them to pay for stuff. You want them to pay for some of the buyer's closing costs. You want them to pay for a home warranty. You want some of the furniture. So you have to kind of finesse that way and say, okay, this is a great price. You have to know, because you're the expert, right? So you know whether that property is priced over market value or under market value. And if it's at market value, how can you make your offer more attractive?
Very important.
Yeah, and I guess the bottom line on all of this is, just four things, right, or three things. Be the expert. Be the calming influence. When you're dealing with residential sales, emotions get high. And it would when you're doing it too. It's probably your biggest, if not one of the biggest, investments that you make is purchasing or selling a home, and so emotions get in there because it's your pocketbook. So your job as the real estate agent is to be the calming influence. That was probably the best advice that I got when I got into real estate. Bring everybody back down to center, right? Say, okay, let's look at this from all sides. What's the pros and cons of this? And then the biggest thing is have enough business so that you're not attached to the outcome. Because your
so
focus
very
has
important.
To be, your focus has got to be on them, not on your commission check. If you focus on them and getting them where they need to be, whether you're working with a buyer or seller, your checkbook will grow. It'll take care of itself. But don't be attached to the outcome. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's such a challenge right there, Gail. And to Gail's point, if you have something, listen, are you going to get every deal signed? I believe you can, right? But the reality is no. At the end of the day. But that belief doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be attached, right? And you got,
Right.
and here's the thing about that, and I reiterate this with everybody when it comes to about this discussion on being attached. The minute you are attached to the outcome is the minute you lose focus on creating win-win opportunities. You don't listen to what they want, what they need, their desires, and so on. You kind of skip over that because you're looking over their head to the commission on the other side of that door, which may or may not be there. What we got to focus in on is not being attached. Yes, of course, you want to get the deal and that you want to achieve your goals. Should not be out of your mind. But when you're into negotiation, you got to be carefully looking at those areas that will enable you to get those transactions signed. And I hear Gail all the time when she talks to me on our coaching calls, it's about them, it's about them, it's about them. And I never hear her say, and everybody would probably go down this path, but I don't hear her say, well, I'm going to get this big commission if I get this deal closed. No, it's about managing the transaction, managing the negotiation. She had a client, if I can remember, coming from out of town. They were in their truck and they had a trailer, and there was things there that were going on. But
two dogs.
Two dogs, and that had to be negotiated, right? That emotion, because as we're talking here, guys, and whether you're selling investment properties or buying and selling homes or you're doing retail, all of these factors lie in play here in the importance of this. And it's really you can. Just real quick,
story a little bit, because you didn't. The part about the people coming down here in the trailer and two dogs is the wife had a heart attack on the way down, 5 hours from here, and ended up in the hospital. And she's on the mortgage, and so closing is supposed to be the next day. So that's the part Mike forgot to put in there. I had to fill that in. Keep going.
No. See those simple things right there, and are being aware, and write this down, guys, being aware of other people's circumstances. And as Gail mentioned, this is an emotional business in and of itself. We're not selling widgets here and nails and screws. We're selling people. And not only do we have to engage on that emotion, we have to understand how they're feeling. I'm negotiating a deal here, and okay, fine. And then I also have to keep in consideration that these people have to pack a box. They got to take their kids out of a school. They got to relocate, get to know neighbors, and there's a number of factors that are going on inside of their minds. And if we can understand that and express that to them, your understanding, being compassionate towards that end, they're going to say, I'll take a little bit less of a price, or I'll pay a little bit more because now I can see myself getting there because you're helping me through this whole process mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and, of course, physically, because that's a whole important, all of these things are important factors. So, yeah. Gail, what's the name of that book? Cialdini? Guys, write this down. If you haven't gotten it yet, get these books.
It's Influence, the Power of Persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember. Cialdini's last name is Cialdini. It's the psychology of persuasion. Yeah, influence.
First name is Robert. Persuasion. Yep. And the other one is Chris Voss, which he wrote is right here. I got it in my Audible. Let me just go back to my library. But it's called Never Split the Difference with Chris Voss.
Yeah, and then the other one for dealing with personalities, and I think you told me about this, was Versatile Selling.
Yeah, Versatile Selling.
Great little book.
Yeah, you can't get that on an Audible or
you can get it
Kindle.
on Amazon for like $15 or something.
Yeah, you have to get it on. You got to get the hard copy, and it's the Wilson Group wrote that book. And then Disc Profile for, we're going to be doing something down the road here in the coming year, maybe in December we might be doing something. But one of my partners is John, Gail, you know him. He's certified Disc in profiling people, and at a very deep level, though, and that's a very important area, guys. Understanding personality styles will help you negotiate through anything at a higher level than anybody else. And you'll see that as you learn it and apply it, it's not difficult. Once you just categorize people and you understand, you can figure out how they speak, how they walk, how they talk, their comments, their words, their body language will tell you very quickly how to present and to how to better work with them and negotiate with them. So very, very powerful. Well,
you want
Gail,
to open this up to any questions
Yep,
at all?
I do. So, guys, let me unmute all of you guys. If anybody, all unmuted. So if you guys have any questions, pressing needs, questions for Gail, ridicules are welcome as well. We're good with that.
This is Elijah.
Go ahead, Elias.
Sorry, it's somebody else. Anyways, this is not a question, but this is something that you brought up with the power of persuasion and reading these books. I found it useful for myself to listen to criminals being interrogated by detectives, and I found it useful for selling the way the detectives use their voice or how they pose the question or make the criminal feel a certain way so that they could open up and tell the truth. I just wanted to throw that out there, but this was such a great call.
Yep, absolutely. And then to your point there, Elijah, is you see that alliance that they have with their personality styles, and you'll notice. And I noticed with Gail, you're asking a lot of questions, right? It's not just a monologue about this is the offer. Does this offer make sense? Can we do? And so you ask questions within that framework, one, to elicit responses and really build a great rapport with people when you do ask a lot of great questions. And they're not that difficult to ask. Just shift your statements to a question, right, Gail?
Absolutely, a great way. If you're on the phone, to find out somebody's personality style is to listen to the answer to describe your home to me.
Mm-hmm.
You can find out real quick whether they're somebody who's compliant, if they're D, if they're a high I. S's are, I don't know what those people are, but it'll tell you. You can find out their personality style quickly.
Yeah.
Just on
absolutely.
saying, describe your home to me.
Actually, I have a question too off of that, because when I ask that question, it seems like some people are like, they tell me, well, what do you mean describe my home to me? Like, you're going to see when you get here, or they'll say stuff like, you see it online kind of thing. So perhaps it's the way I'm asking it or the people that's replying to it, but I thought maybe perhaps I ask it in a way like, what do you love about your home most or something? Could you help me with that?
Well, if they say something like that, then I would probably go back to and say, well, can you tell me any upgrades that you've done either cosmetically or with some of the systems in the last 2 to 5 years?
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when I ask somebody, can you please describe your home to me, they'll say, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, blah, 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 this and that. If it's somebody who's technical, they'll tell me, the SEER rating of their HVAC system, which I'm like this, what? And if it's a driver, they'll just say 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, built in '88, and call it a day, right?
Right. Yeah, and to that point too, Elias, if to help through that process, you could also say, since if you have seen the house, you'd probably want to iterate some things around, by the way, I know when I saw your house, I didn't ask you, by the way, do you have any upgrades that I didn't ask you about, or should I be aware of when I'm putting together my market analysis for the property, right? So that's if you've seen the house. If you haven't seen it and you ask that question, and you might go this route, I've done it intermittently, kind of informally because it's my nature, and experience probably is one other thing, but I would say, so Elias, so I can be fully prepared. Since I haven't seen your house, can you give me an overview of what your house might look like, and I'll make some notes so it can help me put the numbers together better. And they'll give me that, and then I'll say any upgrades, any challenges we might be looking at as far as roof problems, electrical, things like that. So it's kind of partly of how you pose that, if that comes up, and just respond accordingly, and you'll be fine. you'll be fine.
Yeah, another good question on that too is that if you were to rate your home on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being poor and 10 being perfect, what would you rate it? And they might go, well, it's an 8. And say, okay, it's an 8. That's good. What would make it a 10?
That's beautiful.
Yep. Any other questions? Yeah, you're welcome, Elijah. Thank you. Yeah. So, guys, everybody's got the answers full out. Any questions on anything at all that you're dealing with? Take advantage. Gail is very inexpensive today.
Yeah, Gail, I have another question, actually. If you receive somebody calls into the office or somebody referred yourself to them, and they call you up, basically they're a buyer, right? And so you mentioned the buyer's agreement. And so would you go through with them what they're looking for, or right off the cuff say, okay, well, this is how I work, blah, 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 or do you set up for a meeting for them to sit down? You don't do it over the phone. What's the best way to handle that?
There's two parts, and it would be setting up the meeting, and when you're setting up that appointment for them to come in, you're going to go through the part about whether they're paying cash or financing and when are they looking to purchase, and just getting some basic information and saying, well, let me show you how I work. We're going to go ahead and set up an appointment. In fact, I've got time today at 3, or would tomorrow be better? Are you the only decision maker on buying this home? No, it's my husband too. So your husband will be able to come as well, correct? Well, no, he won't be available until Friday. Okay, well, let's schedule it at Friday because I'm sure he's part of this decision-making process. We want to make sure that we make the most of your time and you get him in for that appointment and get him either their pre-approval or their proof of funds for purchase.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've got a script. I'll share that script with you. I got it from my friend Mike Husson. You ever heard of him?
Yeah, Mike Husson, I have heard of him.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a whole buyer script for the setting the appointment, and then once they actually come in and going through the consultation.
Yeah, again, guys, that's, you're negotiating. I learned this years ago that everything is negotiable. Everything that we do, our contracts are negotiable. Yeah, you have it in writing. It's the FAR bar or whatever state you're from coming in. I see some people from Colorado on the call here in Nevada. But every contract is negotiable, right? And also all of your negotiating scheduling, you're negotiating the husband and the wife being there together versus one party being the only person there. And you guys keep in mind that this is, if once you have down the necessary things in order for you to get a contract signed, right, then you have to step into what is the best thing that's going to make that happen. So if a seller says to you, or if a buyer says to you, or whomever says, well, my significant other, I'll be politically correct in these days, or my wife, my husband, my partner, whatever, is not going to be here, you have to step up and say, I can't be there unless they are there, or we can't meet unless, or let's get them together. When would that happen? Because you don't want to go in because you know what's going to happen. It's very normal. You're not going to be able to get a contract signed. And they're going to say, well, I got to talk to my husband. And you're going to say, well, okay, and you're going to typically lose that deal. If not, not always, but you're going to, oh, you did such a great job, and definitely my husband will love you, and he's going to want to sign this paperwork, and then you call him back to follow up, and he says he decided against it because he didn't like the price, right? We need everybody to the party to help negotiate the understanding of why you came with those numbers, why this offer is what it is, and so on. So very, very important part of this negotiation process. All right. So, Gail, any other parting thoughts? Guys, if anybody have any other questions, take advantage now. Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. And
comments, criticisms, things you do differently.
I have a question.
Please.
Hi, Gail. Thank you for all the information, and thank you, Mike, for putting this together. It's great. It's been very informative. Being that the market has slowed, can you give us any other tips besides what you've already mentioned, of what you're doing in order to keep production up? Anything else?
I'm just doing what I always do, making phone calls, setting appointments, right? My market hasn't slowed too much in all areas. That one that I told you that went from 4 months of inventory to 11 months of inventory was in a specific price point. But my last 4 months of the year have been better than the first 8. I think there's always work for those people who work, right? The days of just answering the phone to get a deal are, that, is good sometimes, but when that goes away, you have to go out and find business. There's always people that are buying and selling. So it's just a matter of getting in front of them and just keep doing what you're doing, right? And following up, right? And checking in with past clients and checking in with your sphere of influence and doing your geo-farming and wearing a shirt that says, hey, ask me about real estate. Whatever it takes, just go out there and talk to people.
And Kim, she does wear a shirt that says that, and on the other side is you didn't sign anything with me on the back side of the shirt, so. But yeah, to that point, and that's a great question, Kim. And Kim's down here in the Gables area, Gail, and they're in a price point that is slowing a bit, even stopping in some cases. But to this point of Kim and everybody, that this technique or this understanding, this skill set of negotiating, when we do finally get people, is very, very, and I don't want to sound redundant here, but I will be, and that is it's very important to know this because we don't want to lose what we've got. On the other side, to Gail's point, is being more productive, right? And, yeah, you'll have to dig a little bit deeper in some areas because maybe things have slowed down, but to Gail's point, there's always going to have a need. There's always going to be people that have a need. Not everybody has a need, but there always is going to be a need to buy or sell because people are shifting and they're jiving and they're relocating or they're upsizing or they're downsizing or they got pregnant and they need a bigger home or the kids left the home and they need a smaller home. So it's up to us it's incumbent upon us to go out there and look for those opportunities as Gail said, not wait for them to come to us. Yes, if they do, if the referral comes in, but they're not going to come in if we don't call our database. Right.
Yeah.
So we gotta work the deal. Right. And it's like any muscle. We go to the gym. We don't work out once and we're fit for life. No, you got to consistently work it. And when this market shifts, and it will, guys, and it's nothing bad, as I said in my notes, and I've been saying this for the last several months. It's nothing bad. Again, we're coming into a shift in psychology. We've gone from 2008 when the market crashed. Now we're at a very higher peak. People have made a lot of profit. And you want to go into understanding that if these things occur, the wealthy have money, but they're going, wait a minute, I'm going to wait until it comes down a little bit before I invest, right? So you might be dealing with a motivated seller who needs to sell, and that's going to be great. Or you're dealing with a person who has a lot of money, especially in the wealth arena. You know what? We don't need to sell. We'd like to sell if we could get our number, but we don't need to sell. So you're going to have to be fighting a little bit better or negotiating a clearer understanding of their motivation and seeing what that might look like so you can engage them in saying, okay, you know what? Based on what we've talked about, I really would like to sell versus I want to sell before. Now I really would like to because now I really want to take advantage. I tell people today, I say, listen, if you want to sell your home, move it, take the equity out, and then go negotiate a better deal somewhere else. So you're really moving the money. If you really want to sell for a particular reason, like a smaller house, not just for greed, then you can negotiate that whole process out. So upping your business, as Gail said, you got to be really, percolating, circulating and percolating, whatever they say in the old days in sales. You want to percolate, you got to circulate, kind of a thing. Yeah. So it's just upping the number.
In that same vein, too, is, if a certain segment of your market is slowing, move into another segment. So, I might have, I've got a property closing at $800,000 and one at 1.2, and I just had one at 300. So, maybe you want to take a look at the stats and see what is selling in your marketplace. what's the price point, and maybe that's where you need to go after if everything else is stagnant. So, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very important point. And you got to be diversified, in the markets here as they are, and especially now when they're slowing a little bit, you got to diversify. Doesn't mean you ignore things that are not moving, but as they say, still water creates mosquitoes, right? And so if we want to go to where there's movement, one, it'll generate cash flow for you, okay? There's no harm in selling a $300,000 home if you're coming from selling $3 million homes. There's nothing wrong with it, because the millionaire is the reason why he's got that $3 million home is because he sold products at $1 a piece and made a boatload of money. So there's nothing bad about it, and it's frankly it's a good positioning for you to keep the flow coming in your business when there's movement. If I have a days on market at 300 at 30 days, and I've got a days on market at 240 days at $1 million, I'll get the nice commission at the $1 million, but it's going to take me a year to get there, and I can amortize that out, and I could have been making money today and enjoying my life a little bit easier. Yeah, is it a little bit, psychologically, oh my gosh, I'm going from this to that? You're not. You're a business person. You got to run your business accordingly, and you got to do it according to the market conditions, and you flow with it. Okay? When the market comes to a point where you go back up, you go back up. And if you want to hang out there and you got plenty of money to stay in the higher end, perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with that. As long as you're okay with it, I don't think it's the best business decision myself. I think you need to keep the flow coming, and minimally, the good part about it, you're going to keep your skills going, because while you're sitting on a $2 million house, it's going to sit there for 2 years. You're not doing anything, hoping that commission's going to come in. Guys, you need to be working on your skills and being active and talking to people. Get you better at selling, get you better at getting more business, and it keeps you on top of your game. When we are stagnant, we lose our mindset, we get depressed, we get unhappy, we lose our skill set. We can get back on the bike and get back at it again, but at the end of the day, you still got to get to a point where you can ride on the bicycle free-handed ultimately when you get back on the track. So, embellishment there, Kim.
Great, thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, guys. So, anybody else before we wind this down? We went a little bit longer, but hey, you know what? It's all about value I want to bring to you guys. We're done.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Gail. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time. You'll be getting a copy of this recording. Listen to it. And if you have any questions, send them to us, and I'll be sure to pass them on to Gail. I'm sure she'll be more than happy to answer them at her time, and then we'll make that happen. Guys, thanks for your time. Go make it a great rest of the day, and we will talk to you later. Gail, thank you so much for your time. Totally respect it, and we appreciate you. Okay?
Hey, appreciate you all. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
okay,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great day.